Hello, doctors. I'm Dr. Chris Rapoff of QME Continuing Education, and welcome to this week's presentation. Today we're going to look into a special report, the evaluation of the Senate Bill 863, namely the medical care reform. And this report was taken from a recently published Commission on Health and Safety and Workers' Compensation 2023 annual report. It analyzes the effectiveness of the Senate Bill 863 some 10 years after its implementation. They also provide us some insight as to potential changes and improvements in the medical reforms bill. So let's get started. First, these are the following sources that I referenced when producing this presentation. Feel free to copy and paste these links into your browser if you'd like to read more about the subject of today's presentation. The Senate Bill 863 was originally passed in August of 2012, and it was signed into law by Governor Brown in September of 2012. The bill made wide-ranging changes to the California's workers' compensation system, including increased benefits to injured workers and cost-saving efficiencies. The California Workers' Compensation Program provides the medical care and wage replacement benefits to the workers who suffer on-the-job injuries and illnesses. Injured workers are entitled to receive all the medical care reasonably required to cure or relieve the effects of the injury with no deductibles or co-payments. Now, over the years, workers' compensation medical care expenses have really fluctuated. The total medical expenses increased by 24% from 2007 to 2011, with particularly significant increases in medical cost containment expenses and medical legal costs. Now, the latest workers' compensation medical care reforms were actually enacted by the Senate Bill in 2012. The intention of the Senate Bill 863, the provisions were to constrain the rate of the increase in the medical expenses through a combination of measures that were designed to improve the quality, efficiency, and the timeliness of the medical care given to the injured workers throughout the improvements in the fee schedules as they stand. Now, the key Senate Bill 863 provisions included, first, fee schedule changes. There were changes in the office medical fee schedule, and they were designed to promote the efficient delivery of medical care. These changes included modifications to inpatient hospital and ambulatory surgery facility fee charges that went into effect in 2013. Also, medical provider networks, MPNs, where the Senate bill aimed to improve the operation and the oversight of the medical provider networks. Since January of 2004, the injured workers of employers with MPNs had been required to use network providers throughout the course of their treatment. But the Senate bill provisions included medical access assistance for injured workers, written contracts between MPNs and providers, including the language that the providers would follow in the Medical Treatment Utilization Schedule, or the MTUS guides. In addition, medical legal evaluations. Improving the process of the medical legal evaluation, including addressing deficiencies in the composition of qualified medical evaluator panels, streamlining the process and timelines for evaluations by AMEs and QMEs, and increasing the DWC's oversight of the evaluators and their decisions. With respect to medical necessity disputes, the Independent Medical Review, or IMR process, replaced the AME-QME process. And then effective in July of 2014, an evaluator no longer provides an opinion on any disputed medical treatment issue. Evaluators were to continue to be needed to provide an opinion on whether the injured worker will require future medical care to mitigate the effects of the industrial injury. And finally, Independent Medical Review, as I had mentioned, IMR. They're replacing the existing dispute resolution process with the IMR process, and it was intended to improve the quality and the timeliness of the process for resolving medical necessity determinations. This also took effect in 2013. Now, the study objectives were actually twofold, and it presented the results from two types of analyses that were performed. The first type included analyses of specific Senate Bill 863 provisions. For example, the specific fee schedule changes, with the goal of describing how the provision in question is related to the changes in the workers' compensation paid medical care using and spending. The second type is an analysis evaluating Senate Bill 863 as a whole. The consolidated analysis relies on the pre to post comparisons with control groups to identify in medical care use and spending. Now, the questions that they posed here there were 5 of them actually. The first one, how has the medical care utilization and spending changed over the SB 863 implementation periods in terms of both overall levels and the mix of the services? Number 2, how have utilization and spending changed for specific medical care services affected by the implementation? And what are the overall impacts of the transition to this new method? Also, did other specific fee schedule changes introduced in Senate Bill 863, including the changes to the inpatient hospital and ambulatory surgical centers and the medical legal fee schedule, did they change any utilization and spending on these and the related services? And we'll see, and you'll be surprised. Number 4, they wanted to find out how the changes in the IMR processes affected IMR and utilization review frequency and the other outcomes. And finally, was Senate Bill 863 associated with changes in the medical care utilization and spending for injured workers after controlling the unrelated trends through the comparison of control patients? Now, the primary data source for this study comes from the Workers' Compensation Information System database, and it was maintained by the Division of Workers' Compensation for the services provided 2007 to 2015. Now, there were significant changes in the use of and the spending on medical services affected by this Senate bill, including marked increases in spending on E&M, or evaluation and management services, for which the fee schedule changes raised the payment rates and declined in laboratory and pathology service use and payments. So researchers also found that some changes were not anticipated. For example, increases in spending within 12 months of the injury on physical medical services. In 2014, the spending on evaluation and management increased to nearly 30% of the total payments in the year of the injury, and to approximately 35% in 2015. They found that 2/3 of this growth was attributed to the changes on this fee schedule, and the rest to an increase in the evaluation and management service utilization. So it's interesting. However, most of the increase in the utilization appears to have been due to the consultation visits that were billed as office visits in 2014, because 2014 consultation visits were no longer paid under the new fee schedule. So someone had a go around on it and found a way to get these charges paid for. So now I'd like to discuss other specific fee schedule changes. Inpatient hospital, for instance. The RAND found a reduction in inpatient hospital stays per claim from 2012 to 2014. And across all the inpatient stays in acute care hospitals subject to the new OMFS for inpatient hospital services, or the fee schedule, from 2012 to 2014, total discharges decreased by 12.6%, whereas the average allowance per discharge also decreased, but only 8.7%. Now, the ambulatory surgery centers, the ASC schedule, they found that the fee schedule comparison also highlighted the generosity of the fee schedule for the ASC facility allowances relative to other Medicare-based fee schedules. In addition to the overall finding that estimated payments were 138% of the Medicare ASC allowances, and the differences across those types of procedures were of concern. Now, Senate Bill 863 reduced the aggregate allowance for the emergency ambulatory surgery center facility services to 80% from 138% of Medicare's hospital outpatient prospective payment services system. Now, of particular interest to QMEs, we'll discuss the medical legal fee schedule and their findings. Now, the medical legal fee schedule had not been updated since 2007. And if you recall, it was most recently updated in 2021 with the changes. But they did estimate that the payments prior to those changes in 2021, they thought these payments for the evaluation and management services were projected to increase when Senate Bill 863 was fully implemented before further adjustments for inflation. However, instead, RAND found that the cost of a $250 per hour, which was the fee then, used to determine a medical legal allowance was significantly higher than the transition 2017 allowances for evaluation and management services, which consisted of similar activities, but not of a QME. Despite these increases, the number of subsequent follow-up evaluations had also increased significantly. Now, together, the trends suggest that the allowances for extraordinarily complex evaluations should be restructured. Hence comes 2021 changes. RAND also discussed several considerations that might motivate the efficient completion of high-quality evaluations. And here are their recommendations, including maybe flat rates for a complex ML104 evaluation, limitations of supplemental reports, performing all diagnostic testing before an evaluation, and the orderly control over medical documentation. You know that some of these, or most of these, were addressed in the 2021 medical legal fee schedule changes that they had made. Some are not happy, others are ecstatic that those changes were made. Now we move on to the medical necessity dispute resolution process and the IMR and utilization review frequency. So the medical necessity dispute resolution process begins with a utilization review of a medical care that was provided to an injured worker. Now, only a physician can issue an adverse UR decision to modify or deny the requested treatment. Senate Bill 863 streamlined the medical necessity dispute resolution process and shifted responsibility for resolving the disputes from the work comp administrative law judge to medical experts. Now, the DWC contracted with Maximus to perform the independent medical review organization function. Anyone who's been working in the QME aspect, you will recognize Maximus. Now, the issue that occurred when the IMR process was implemented have largely been addressed. Maximus has eliminated the initial backlog of the IMR reviews and is issuing IMR decisions in a timely fashion after supporting documentation is submitted by the claims administrator. The penalties for not complying with the IMR notice and the reporting requirements were also strengthened. Okay, let's look at the report's recommendations after we've seen what the study produced. For medical legal services, of particular interest to us, consideration should be given to converting the allowance for an extraordinarily complex evaluation into a flat rate based on the complexity of the issues that needed to be addressed by the evaluator. So they have taken away ML104 and replaced it with 201, a straight fee. For medical legal services, consideration should be given to establishing policies that provide incentives for the QMEs producing a high-quality report that addresses the issues that are outlined in cover letters from the parties requesting the evaluation. This is no surprise. You must answer the questions posed in the discussion section. And for example, they also mentioned that the timely completion of these reports and the comprehensive reporting could actually be incentivized by establishing a higher payment for the timely submissions and by not paying for an initial evaluation unless the issues had been addressed respectively. So we could see this could be somewhat of a grading scale, in which they are talking about possibly implementing in 2025, as the DWC is proposing have minimum standards that are required for the QME to pass the substantial medical evidence and to pass the muster from the DWC. This should be coming in 2025. Additional recommendations included for ambulatory surgery facility services, that consideration should be given to replacing the OPPS-based fee schedule with the ambulatory surgery center-based fee schedule. Also, continue to monitor trends in the utilization and spending for different medical service categories. Also, continue to monitor trends in the work-related outcomes for injured workers. And finally, to pursue additional analyses comparing the changes in the outcomes for California injured workers to comparison groups, including possibly injured workers in other states or patients in California with injuries that are not work-related. So here we have a recent June 2024 published report, and actually a special report, that provided us with additional information as to the effectiveness of the Senate Bill 863, originally passed in 2012, 10 years after its implementation. It appears that the areas of the rising cost of medical care as it relates to workers' compensation in the state of California were mitigated, while other aspects of the increasing cost of medical care were not. So let's see how this new information is going to be put to use, and will it prompt additional changes to the workers' compensation system? I encourage you to stay tuned as we expect those in decision-making positions to suggest and even implement more changes as they attempt to reel in the cost of medical care in California. So doctors, I'm Dr. Chris Rapoff. I wanted to thank you again for taking the time to join me in this presentation. I hope you enjoyed it, and I look forward to spending more time with you and relaying interesting subjects as they relate to the topics involving workers' compensation in the state of California. Until then, thank you.